So there's this story that's absolutely blowing up online, right? It's this epic narrative of a global financial showdown. On one side, you've got the BRICS nations. On the other, the US dollar. But is this really a fight for the future of money? Or is something else entirely going on behind all the hype?
You've seen the headlines, I'm sure. Is the dollar's dominance about to end? Are we on the verge of a massive shift in global power? It's a really dramatic idea, for sure, but is it the whole story?
Okay, but this is where we gotta pump the brakes a little. The reality? It's way, way more nuanced. That popular story of some epic clash, well, it might be missing the entire point. So let's separate the myth from the cold, hard financial facts.
And to do that, here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the myth versus the reality, then dig into why BRICS even wants change. We'll look at the incredible numbers behind the dollar's strength, uncover what BRICS is actually doing, and finally, we'll map out what the future financial order really looks like.
All right, first up, let's get a handle on what this story is truly about, because it's definitely not the financial blockbuster some people are making it out to be.
Look, the key thing to get here is that we're not watching some revolution aimed at taking down the dollar overnight. No way. What's actually happening is a slow, steady process. It's born from a genuine dissatisfaction, and it's leading countries to experiment with alternatives to kind of, gently test the boundaries of the current system.
So that begs a pretty important question, right? Why is this happening at all? What is really driving the BRICS nations to go looking for alternatives in the first place?
Well, the reasons are deeply strategic. This is about giving the Global South a much bigger voice in huge institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. It's about building financial plumbing that's less vulnerable to sanctions and this growing fear that the dollar could be used as a political weapon. And ultimately, it's about creating a world where countries can trade more easily using their own currencies.
But wanting to change the system and actually changing it are two totally different ballgames. To really get the scale of the challenge BRICS is facing, we need to look at the cold, hard data that holds up the dollar's entire kingdom.
I mean, just take a look at this. This is what central banks around the world are actually holding in their vaults. The US dollar makes up almost 58% of all global reserves. The Chinese renminbi from the biggest BRICS economy is sitting at just over 2%. We're not talking about a small gap, that's a canyon. And this number, wow. This just perfectly shows the dollar's role in the very plumbing of the global economy. Anytime currencies are swapped, anywhere in the world, the dollar is involved nearly 90% of the time. It is, quite literally, the universal language of money.
Okay, and what about how money actually moves for big international payments? The dollar isn't just a popular choice. It's the default superhighway for global business, handling almost half of all transactions by value. And again, just compare that to the renminbi at a tiny 3.5%.
So why? What's the dollar's secret sauce? Well, it's not just a habit. The US offers these massive financial markets that are super easy to get into, a stable legal system people trust, and this is crucial, a huge supply of safe investments like treasury bonds. And on top of all that, you have this incredibly powerful network effect. The dollar is king simply because everyone else uses it.
Okay, so given this absolute fortress that is the US dollar, what are the BRICS nations really up to? This is where we have to pivot from that myth of a single rival currency to what's actually happening on the ground.
And this slide, right here, gets to the absolute heart of it. The popular story you hear online is all about a single BRICS coin that's going to take on the dollar. But the official reality, what they're actually saying and doing, is focused somewhere else entirely. They're building the pipes and platforms to make trading in their own currencies easier.
And if you want the smoking gun, here it is. The official declaration from their big summit is jam-packed with details about payment systems and financing projects in local currencies, but you know the one thing it doesn't mention, not even once? A common currency. And that omission, well, it speaks volumes about what they're really prioritizing.
So instead of some mythical coin, they're building real, tangible stuff. The new development bank is already doing loans in currencies like the Chinese renminbi and the South African rand. They're working on a new cross-border payment system, and they're creating rulebooks so two member countries can trade directly with each other, completely bypassing the dollar system.
But it's not all smooth sailing. There's a major internal roadblock we have to talk about. BRICS is a really diverse group, and while China would absolutely love for its renminbi to become the new top dog, other powerful members like India have zero interest in simply swapping their reliance on the US dollar for a new reliance on China. And that disagreement is a huge break on any kind of unified currency project.
So, if this isn't some simple one versus one boxing match, what does the future of money actually look like? Well, the best way to wrap your head around it is to think of it as a system with a few different layers.
Think of it like this. At the very top layer, the US dollar remains the undisputed king of global finance, period. But in the middle layer, BRICS is busy building those alternative routes, new payment systems, new frameworks for local trade. And then, at the bottom layer, individual countries are making their own side deals to trade directly with each other outside the main system. It's becoming a multi-layered world.
And that really brings us to the perfect way to sum all this up. The future isn't a story of BRICS replaces the dollar. No. It's a story where the dollar stays king, but its total monopoly starts to shrink a little bit right at the edges. The system is just becoming a little less centralized.
Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The dollar's fortress is still standing, tall and secure. But the actions of the BRICS nations and others are slowly but surely redrawing the map around it. So the real question isn't whether the king is about to be toppled, but whether his kingdom is going to be quite as vast in the decades to come.